Hello, everyone. Welcome to Heart and Hand the Rangers podcast. My name is Cammy Bell. I'm your host, as always, on your extra show for the week. And I have got a brilliant game to talk about and a very exciting League Cup final to talk about. And I thought I could bring out the one man who would make sure to dampen that enthusiasm, and that's my very good friend, Martyn Ramsay. Martyn, thank you for coming on.
Such a harsh reputation, but yeah, delighted to be here, Cammy. It's been a while, but yeah, lots of good things to chat about in all things Rangers.
Well, see, it's funny you mention that, right? Because I was thinking to myself, you get a hard turn of it on flagship, Martyn, because Edgar tends to wheel you out when there's been a disappointing performance, and you can add your textbook logic.
A
And
big disappointing performance in a big game rather than every week. Otherwise,
yeah,
I'd never
yeah,
be off the waves.
yeah.
Yeah.
And over the last few weeks, it's been tough to do that with you because Rangers have had an upturn. None more so than an excellent performance at Ibrox last night with a 1-1 draw in the Europa League against Tottenham Hotspur. Martyn, what's your kind of thoughts as we're now in the cold light of day after leaving the stadium last night? I'll be honest with you, I was absolutely elated. I thought, I was really, really proud of the team. I thought, well, in context, it's not a great Spurs team and all that. That's what I thought it would be at. But I'll be honest with you, I'm still as happy recording as we are on Friday afternoon as I was last night coming out of the stadium.
Yeah, I think I'm probably in the same boat. You can be clearly overcritical at times, and I think at the final whistle, because of that chance, you knew there was a possibility there for a famous victory. But also with that block, there was also a chance that could have been cruelly, the point could have been cruelly taken away. So I that has dissipated, I think, and I think what you're left with is the performance, is the state of play in the league, the Europa League, which is very healthy, and the takeaways are pretty much all positive. It is pride, and I, we don't really like using that word because it's such a tartan army kind of cliche for no win but very proud. But we did play well, and if we're here to do analysis, 24 hours later, um, this is not a Spurs side full of the fire. We know that they're under huge pressure, but other than the centre backs, talent. Maybe not firing, but the ability to potentially switch on as they did in moments last night. So we can't take anything away. It was right. There obviously were moments of where that lack of concentration gets punished or nearly gets punished. We all talked about that in the lead up to the game. Same on Sunday. But over the piece, it was committed, it was focused, it was positive, it was brave, both with the ball and without the ball, in various different aspects of the game. And, Rangers fans venerate that kind of effort and courage probably more than they appreciate finding a teammate in 10 yards, to be honest, at times. For better or worse, that's kind of what runs through the club. But we badly needed to see that performance. I think we would all have accepted if we'd been narrowly edged out by a Premier League team who were bringing millions of pounds worth of talent off the bench. But we still saw what we saw. The fact that we did see what we saw and can take a point away was, absolutely. It was a fun night, Cammy. I don't know if I'm pretty sure you would agree with that. And we haven't had many of late.
That's exactly my takeaway from it, and it's been interesting seeing the thought process, I think, of some of our fans because I've spoken to some people, last night, today, disappointed that we didn't get the win, and I do understand that because of obviously that chance with Dessers right at the end. But then I consider the conversations I had and probably my attitude to it when we were going into the stadium, speaking to people and saying, just hope we don't get turned over. We know that this is David versus Goliath. The levels are, otherworldly. And even when we were talking about it in the build-up across in our Patreon site, and we were kind of forecasting, the domestic games, Joseph Kelly, Ross County, and talking about the League Cup final, I always felt that this Spurs game was going to be problematic because what I really wanted to avoid doing more than anything else was avoid, a really disheartening tanking, which would have taken the confidence levels down quite a bit. And for that purpose, I'd said that the timing is a bit rubbish because you want the team to go into a flyer going into the League Cup final because it's colossal. And then, and this is exactly why I feel so pleased today in the fact that we came out of the ground and yeah, you're ruining the missed chances, but when you look at the game in its entirety, I've had the chance to be able to watch it back since, and the number of chances that we were able to create, matched by our hard work and our endeavour, being relentless at times, uh, I think just is what probably gives me, that core feeling of just feeling so proud of the team, which isn't, as we mentioned at the top of the show, isn't something which we've had in abundance, 2 months ago. So, you think about like the Dundee United game, for example, and you're saying, yeah, but don't worry about it because in mid-December, you'll draw level with Spurs in a game that you should have won. So I think sometimes it's handy to maybe have a little bit of perspective in terms of where you've been and where you are now. But one of the things, and this is kind of where I wanted to talk to you about, was we know obviously how the game played out, Martyn. You do a phenomenal show on our Patreon site, When the Seagulls Follow the Trawler. I consider myself a little bit of a kind of an English football tourist. I'll dip in and out. You're entrenched in it. You absolutely love it. Your feeling when you saw, the Spurs lineup. You've obviously mentioned some of the injuries that were involved within there, but there's still absolute quality in it. I know a lot of people were obviously talking about the result against Chelsea and losing the lead, the pressure on Postecoglou, etc. But going in, how did you feel it was going to turn out?
It's easy to say. I thought it'd be 1-1, Cammy, to be honest. No, I did think we could get a score draw, but if I had to, be pressed to put money on it, I probably would have thought Spurs would win, but narrowly. I didn't fear the Liverpool thing. They're simply not anywhere near in the kind of shape to be dishing that out to anybody, to be honest. But obviously more than capable of edging ahead and keeping us at arm's length, probably. So that's kind of where I was looking at the picture. Happy to see Timo Werner there because he's awful, and Postecoglou crucified him later.
I was going to say, yeah, his manager certainly seems to agree with that opinion as well.
Well, he hasn't been good for a while. Probably don't bring him in, would be the takeaway from that. But that's their problem, obviously. But then Kulusevski, who I think is just such a brilliant player. Brennan Johnson was quiet. He's had a good season. I wasn't so surprised that Son wasn't quite the tormentor that he may have been this time last year.
Yeah, I was going to say, he seems like he's lost a bit of it.
He has a wee bit. So, we have to take away how we dealt, I think, with some of the threats on the flanks, more of which on Sunday. That's still a strong midfield. And, David and I were speaking in the press room beforehand on the kind of pre-match show. Huge night for Raskin, because I don't think Diomande, I don't think anyone knows what Diomande's number is really, what his position is. But it's certainly a different night for Raskin than maybe playing alongside Barron, for example, and he's got that support. He was outstanding, easily his best game in a Rangers jersey. I'm sure you come on to that later. So it's what I did feel was you could get at that defence, mainly because they've got a young boy playing in centre defence. It's clearly nowhere near their best two. His partner is a disaster waiting to happen at times. He's a red card waiting to happen at times. The way they play, you can get in. And so all these things, right, there were opportunities there, and we did well to cause problems. We know what our issues are, Cammy. It's still there. I think some of the interplay, especially the game on pockets of the game, was quick and intelligent and confident. A lot of 1-2s, a lot of triangles, a lot of spinning in behind. Our decision making in the final third isn't the best, and that probably bore out over the course of the 90 minutes because we don't have players who have the quality to make those decisions under pressure. Really, I don't really buy that there's a golden manager out there who can deal with that or coach that better, possibly improve it. But I don't think those decision making abilities are absolutely there under the pump. But what we did in midfield was a real bonus for us, I think, because there was a danger that we could be overrun, and I thought we did very well there.
Yeah, I think the thing that I loved best when I was looking at it, and you mentioned a lot of the stuff as well, which absolutely, I was adoring when I was watching it, was the quick play, the things that we've been talking about that's been missing prior to the last few weeks. That it's been able to move at pace with the ball, been able to play it quickly, not taking too many touches, which then starts to cause an unnecessary delay. But the thing I really enjoyed, and you mentioned Nico Rasker already, because he was pivotal at this, was just being able to mop up the second ball, the loose ball, being able to just start to recycle it, but do it so quickly. And again, that degree of trepidation, as we kind of talked about, getting into it, there was probably a point, I think, about 10 minutes in, where I started to remember that this was actually Rangers in the Europa League, and it's unlike the domestic team that we've seen across the course of the season. It's absolutely night and day in terms of some of the performances that we've had thus far. And I wasn't being glib when we were talking about last night is a little bit of a free hit, because you have to remember the work that has went into being able to get us into the position for the Europa League up to this point. But the application, I think, that the midfield in particular showed, you're totally right about Diamande. There's a little bit of that where he can kind of float, but when he does get the ball, and especially at close quarters, his feet are magnificent in terms of just being able to generate a chance or generate something. And when he has Raskin next to him, who again can do some of those hard tackles, when he has to get into them, he can harry, he can close down, he can be a pest, he can get the ball and he can recycle it. I agree with you, by the way. I think that was his best game in a Rangers jersey. But with an interesting option to bring in Ridvan Yilmaz as well. I was curious to get your thoughts on that, because we know how it worked out, but looking at it, I thought I kind of understand it. But I thought, he played pretty well within that, considering the fact he's also just coming back from a decent length of a layoff.
Yeah, a bit of a curveball, but I thought it worked. It worked an absolute treat. I thought Ridvan was superb last night, genuinely superb. And they have an understanding, I think. Now, Jeff Day, again, he's not the complete left back. He got himself in a couple of difficult spots in the period of about 2 or 3 minutes in the first half. His head kind of left him a bit, but he recovered. But I just thought that was a bit of a masterstroke, to be honest. Lots of energy, just again understanding, giving Jeff Day that support, knowing the kind of runs that he's going to make. I think I asked the manager after, knowing that he was not going to give me the absolute answer, but that might have been it was obviously a thought for last night. But does he have something to think about for Sunday? Would that genuinely be a consideration? I'd be interested to see what happens. I doubt it will, but I think that could cause Celtic more problems than maybe some of the other options we could go with there. He's a very intelligent player. Obviously, he has his injury issues, and that's really no use to us over the course of a season, like any player. But I think he understands the pitch, and he understands his role, and he understands that can change. And just as it looked last season like he had an immediate understanding with Cortez and that brief spell that they had playing down the left together, he, I think, has the same kind of awareness, understanding with Jeff Day. He's a smart boy, football wise, and I thought for all the physique that was on show, and you see a Premier League team up close, they're big and powerful and quick. But the two best players were probably the two smallest.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But we cannot not talk about Hamza Igamane. 4 goals in the Europa League so far. He's now 5-5 across all competitions. We have spoken about this before, so I apologise for repetition, listeners. But the key difference, I think, for me last night, Martyn, was his hold-up play was absolutely fantastic when we needed it to be. We know what he can do with the ball at his feet. We know what we can do when he's running towards attackers. Loves a nutmeg. Absolutely loves a nutmeg.
Yeah, he does.
But his ability, and he's not small, but he's also not the tallest. But the way he's able to use his body to generate it, there's already been some big comparisons made between him and Alfredo Morelos, which I'll take every single day of the week. But he's just made such a difference. And the finish, I thought, was absolutely sublime. The cross in from James Tavernier is perfection. And we have to give Tav praise in terms of his upturning performances across the course of the last few games, because he has had a difficult season and we've been quick to criticise, so we have to be equally quick to praise. But Igamane just looks a proper threat. He really, really does. And he took his goal superbly. But as I say, it wasn't just the goal. It was a combination of pretty much everything. And I think he's bringing in a real positivity to the team, but a confidence that when he can get the ball to him, you know that you're going to be able to get in and support him, because something will come of it. And that's been a big problem, I think, throughout the first third of this season so far.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, I think the manager spoke, it was either at Kilmarnock or Ross County after one of those games, and was very... he's a rough diamond, and they were quite happy to take that gamble. Your point about holding the ball up, and that's it. You just can't be a forward at anywhere near the top level if you can't do that. I just don't see. You're basically then relying on mistakes or being in and around the penalty area, really, for things to just drop. And if you're relying on that, you better be able to do it when the chance comes. If you can't hold it up, bring others into play, bring players closer to the action, you're useless at the top level. Now, clearly, he has a lot more polishing to do of that particular diamond before we package up and sell on, because that's the plan, obviously. But he has the absolute raw materials, I think. Took a while. Those raw materials were on show pretty early. Remember Tannadice, kind of near the start of the season, where we were amazed at the sight of a Rangers striker holding the ball up, turning a defender and moving past him in one move. But can he finish? He took a wee while to get a goal, but now, yes, he can, and he clearly just wants to play all the time. So he could be a lot of fun while we have him, but still needs that guidance. Still needs a lot of shepherding. He has a body type that I think would always be in danger of maybe going the wrong way if he isn't on it. So, a lot of work still to do, but yeah, clearly the absolute raw material there to work with.
Yeah, and I think obviously we conceded the equaliser. I know a lot of people felt as if it was going against the run of play. I don't really agree with that, to be honest. I think when we hit,
I don't.
Probably 65 minutes, I would say, I remember feeling, they are looking leggy. Understandably so, by the way, again, not a criticism, but we had done a hell of a lot of work being able to just try and press Spurs wherever we possibly could. We were making them produce some unforced errors, and we really had, I think, they're numbered in certain periods of the game, but by this point, Martyn, I just felt this is going to take, ideally, a bit of an injection for subs. We can't compare the quality. You see the value of the subs that Spurs were able to bring on. We don't have anything that can match that. But it was a difficult one to take but then you're also at the same point thinking to yourselves, well, listen, do you know what? You just have to take the rough with the smooth, I suppose, is really what I'm trying to say. And as you rightly said as well, there is absolute quality within that Spurs line, even if some of the other ones are not firing. And I think, as weird as it sounds, if you're going to concede a goal, it almost came at a time that you were really in the balance, because I felt if that had come maybe about 10 minutes earlier, I'll be honest with you, I thought Spurs probably would have been able to take the 3 points. But it came at a stage where I think if we can just keep it together and just maintain our focus, try and not break the shape again, which I think for me is why we conceded the goal. But it was going to take a big effort on the back of that to make sure to try and see it out. And obviously gutting not to be able to win it with that Dessers chance at the end.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. The goal was coming. I felt it was coming. Spurs were doing something that they hadn't really done much of throughout the game, which was just being patient and moving us about, moving us out of position, and producing space, creating space, and they were pretty lethal when that happened. They didn't do enough of that. If you're a Spurs fan, that would be a huge frustration, I think. And I certainly felt like, oh no, okay, it was still very early as far as I was concerned, and this was going to be 20 minutes of siege defending. And I think I said this, last night on one of the kind of post-match press conference shows or whatever, that it was one of the highlights of the night for me that Rangers were able to flip that momentum pretty much immediately back on Spurs. That they weren't going to just try and dig in and try and see out the draw, hold what you have, and that we pushed and pushed and pushed for a winner. I think it would have been far easier, far more natural, just to say, well, you know what, we've done well, we're running out of energy, and it looked as if we were, by the way. We've got a huge game on Sunday. Let's not be silly here. If we can get out of here with a draw, without expending too much in the way of energy in the legs and whatever, then let's take it. But fair fucks to that Rangers team. They were not happy with a point, and certainly sought to get something more. I'm out of words for Dessers, to be honest. I'm fed up talking about it. How he gets into that position is incredible. It is good work. It is a brilliant save, but he shouldn't have a hope, in my opinion. And again, that's talking about replacements, talking about subs. Even in the first half, Cammy, we in that final area again. Do we have what it absolutely takes in crunch moments, knowing that this isn't Ross County? You're not going to get another one probably in 5 minutes. I'm not convinced that we do. In fact, I'm very far from convinced that we do. But that is where we are. That's the kind of level that we have available. Again, I was just happy with how the team reacted. The tackles were still getting crunched into in the middle of the park, breaking stuff up and breaking, and having that impetus to go and try and find that winner. So that has to be acclaimed. That has to be celebrated, actually. And yeah, we just take what we can from that.
Yeah, and in another world where, as you rightly say, if Spurs had went ahead, been able to capitalise in that last 20 minutes of the game, and Dessers scores that chance, and you come out with a 2-2 draw, you're cartwheeling out of Ibrox because you're thinking to yourself, yeah, we've been able to get it. And that's the swings and roundabouts, right? That's just that's just what happens.
Or even if we dug in for those 20 minutes and it had finished 1-1.
Yeah.
I think people would say, you know what a lot of bravery off the ball there. We absolutely battened down the hatches. We limited them just to the equaliser. Well done. It's just because you have that opportunity for a very famous win, and all the circumstances around the Spurs team management at this particular time, it would have. Yeah, it was there. We all saw it go in. I think we just so that's what just gave that immediate kind of bittersweet. But time has passed, and there are a lot of positives to take away for sure.
Yeah, if someone would like to look at that Dessers opportunity in isolation and make an offer for him without looking at any of his previous games, I'd be willing to accept it. I think is probably fair to say. But it wouldn't be Rangers in the build-up for an Old Firm game, Martin, without some sort of injury problem, and that obviously came in the form of John Souttar had to go off in the first half, replaced by Liam Balogun. That's a problem because Souttar, I think, has been playing very, very well recently. Did not look out of sorts for me last night prior to going off. And it leads to the question about whether or not we are going to have to rely on Liam Balogun and Robin Propper going into Sunday's League Cup final. I thought Propper played very well last night, but I'd use that with the caveat that I just don't think he fancies Scottish football. So when you put him in a European arena, then he looks pretty good. He looks wholly comfortable. If Souttar has to miss Sunday, Martin, how confident are you in that centre half pairing?
I mean, I'd rather he was available, obviously. I'm not quite as catastrophic as others because I don't think any of our defenders have a record worth a fuck against Celtic to be saying, oh, how can we cope without that player? They all have nightmares. So whatever combination is used, for whatever reason it has to be used, we have problems there. We will have problems there on Sunday. For me, it's about, can we for once grab hold of the midfield? Can we for once take the opportunities that are available and not have to rely on, 50-50 refereeing decisions or whatever else? Can our players actually just do their job? But I'm kind of working under the assumption that we will concede. If we concede first, that's a huge problem in my opinion. But I'm not. It's not as if Souttar has this great long legacy of outstanding command and performance. I know he's in a lot of form, and certainly probably the best form he's been in since being at the club. But yeah, I'm kind of neither here nor there really, because I think we have defensive issues anyway. Your point about Propper is a fair one. I thought he was very good last night. I think part of his issues previously had been standoffish and not committing, whereas I think he was committing to everything last night, and we need to see that. So fine, I do accept the point though, and I think that transfers to the team, right? How can a Rangers team play like this? How can a Rangers team play the way we did in Nice, the way we did in Greece, the way we did in Sweden, and be so desperate at times domestically? And you can probably apply that to much of the last 3 or 4 years, to be honest. I would suggest that the players know that the players they have available and the way we play suits the task at hand in the Europa League. And therefore they're very confident that when they turn up for work, what they're asked to do that day is doable. I think they know that the players we've had available, the players we've bought, the way that we've asked to play isn't as suited to the domestic churn, and there's always the possibility of dropping points, and they're very nervous about that. The Old Firm thing is a thing, and that's not just direct head-to-heads against Celtic as we get on Sunday and we get on the 2nd of January. It's the fact that they're in the competition. And, for me, you hear it quite a lot, Rangers should have more than enough to beat the other 10. I accept the theory, absolutely no problem. It kind of goes without saying. Rangers aren't dropping points to Aberdeen or Kilmarnock or Dundee United. They're dropping points against themselves. There's a pressure just inherent in the Scottish, Premier League or whatever it's called these days. And they feel that, and I don't think they feel anywhere near as free or as confident that they have the tools to do kind of what's required. So all of that, I think, is fair, not just for Robin Propper, but for this Rangers team. So much to take away from last night, Cammy. And if you're out on the right side of bed, you're looking ahead to Sunday because you've seen tenacity, you've seen intensity, you've seen great combinations, you've seen options. Go back to that left-sided thing, and thinking, well, we can take that into to Sunday, go toe to toe. have a bit of belief. If you're going out the wrong side of bed, you'll say that Sunday is its own microcosm. It's its own thing. It bears no relation to last night whatsoever, because there's a fear factor there, and until we see something different, it will be there. And that's the big. That's obviously the big question. That's obviously the big challenge. But yeah, we obviously have to kind of cling on to the positives until 3:30 and see what happens. We're a bipolar support, like probably most football supports, to be fair. And people want the manager gone, absolutely, frothing about it a few weeks ago. Slightly quieter. I think quite a lot of them had pinned the Spurs game as being the worst it's going to get. Very publicly pinned that as the worst it's going to get. And noticeably quiet last night. What I would say in defence of the manager, I think I said it on one of the kind of press conference post matches the other week. Why weren't we playing like this at the start of the season? Those players weren't available. The players that make the difference at the moment either weren't available at all, or were nowhere near as fit as they are just now. Raskin is a fitter specimen of a player, of an athlete. Manager talked about it last night. I think he's talked about it recently as well. That player that we saw last night was not available for selection. He might have been in the famous building, but he was not. That's not there. That option's not there. Christ knows what weight Igamane was when he arrived. Certainly doesn't look the way he does now. Danilo, obviously. Another part, Hadji for other reasons. So we are dealing with a different set of options, a different look. So in theory, you're going with a full win behind you, and it's a cup final. It's that has a slight difference, obviously, than the kind of grind, the kind of pressure of a league championship. But it's still whether them as a group find it within themselves to perform and complete this task, which is a different world from last night. And until they do, why would we be overly confident? I guess is always the thing at the back of your mind, because we need to see it.
Well, you were talking there about a big question, so I'm going to throw another big question at you, and forgive me because I hate putting guests in the spot. Who starts at right back on Sunday afternoon?
It's a huge question, and I think the manager, if he was ever honest, which of course managers can't be publicly, would be able to answer that very easily a couple of weeks ago. I think he would have had it in his mind that Sterling would be starting. I do wonder if he'll go with that still, and he'll probably stand by his guns, because you mentioned Tavernier has had that uptick. But I wouldn't. I think, again, go back to tissue and nightmares. I think he's a problem there. I still think he could come on and do something if the state of the game kind of demanded that later on. And certainly Dujon Sterling's no guarantee of turning into Cafu. But that is an issue for us. And I think it would be remiss not to at least try and do something different. I think it sets a different tone, by the way, that today is different. But I'm not sure he will. Or maybe you might see Sterling play instead of Czerny and try and double up. But again, do we lose something from that? Yeah, it's one of those.
Yeah, listen, it's a tough one to answer, and I've been going kind of back and forth in my head, and then again, you see the performance last night. You see the cross that comes in for Igamane for the opener, and you're just thinking to yourself, "This is where we want to get back to." And I've mentioned on a few shows over the last couple of weeks that Tavernier, to me, he's not getting in a lucky cross or getting on the end of fortunate balls and scoring goals, or causing OGs or whatever. That's not the main thing that I'm seeing from him in terms of that uptick. What I'm seeing from him is that he just looks more agile now. And I don't mean necessarily, I probably mean that more mentally than physically. You'll never be told the real truth in player interviews and all of that kind of nonsense. But his body language to me, Martyn, just seems different. It seems far more positive. When he knew that he was in this quagmire of just making mistakes and not playing as well as he knows he is still able to, as he has shown within the last few weeks, it just felt to me like as if his head wasn't in the right place. He just wasn't feeling as if he could make a difference. So now I'm probably at the stage where I think it is, personally, I think it's a coin toss between him and Sterling now, whereas 2 weeks ago, well, probably more than that, sorry, about 4 weeks ago, the answer was definitive. It had to be Sterling. The Czerny swap out is interesting. Personally, I would still stick with Czerny. I know you kind of mentioned there that's where there's probably a productive output going forward that we may lack. Sterling has, for me, a greater physical presence. So if you're talking about opening up, it's Czerny. If you're talking about being able just to win the battle, then I think it's Sterling. So I suppose really what I'm trying to say at the moment just now, when we see a starting lineup, the manager has, through his own work, earned probably a little bit of that trust back. Whereas I think if you were to go 4, 5, 6 weeks back in time, and as you're rocking into Hampden and you see James Tavernier in the starting lineup, you're already thinking, nah, we're really, really going to struggle today. I think that feeling has definitely dissipated. And for that, by the way, I would say that the manager, as well as James Tavernier, deserves some credit.
All fair. But Sunday's different. It's nothing to do with the last 5 weeks. And that's until proven otherwise, that's where the fear will be. It is a day of its own. It's a contest of its own, and I've heard it all before. That there's a corner turned and the body language is looking better. And listen, that cross last night was sublime. He's capable of doing that. He's capable of doing that on Sunday. That is not the issue. It's the terrorising he gets defensively in this fixture that would be a concern. And here, as I said earlier, for me, if we concede first, I don't fancy us win the cup, to be honest. These games can be lost. They can't be won in the first 20 minutes probably, but they can certainly be lost from our point of view, and stay in it. And I don't have an issue with perhaps, belt and braces in a couple of places, Raskin and Barron, for example, that we kind of start to dominate physically. I don't mean try to see out a siege, by the way, because that's asking for trouble. I just mean being a bit more robust and a wee bit more resolute for an hour, and then we genuinely do have options that can. You saw how worried they were at the end of the cup final in May. Again, we just couldn't make it count, and they could, but just keep the game alive for as long as possible, and I think then we have an opportunity maybe to do other things. But listen, it's we know Old Firm games they are in their own climate, but I would certainly start Sterling. I think there needs to be, from the first whistle, something that feels different, and that's certainly one way. But I think he might actually double up there.
Yeah, I mean it's very possible, and again it probably leads me on to my kind of next point, which is I couldn't agree more in terms of Old Firm games, much less cup finals, are their own I think you and I are very similar in this, that Rangers could have won 20 games in the bounce 8-0, and you and I would still be thinking, yeah, but it's an Old Firm game, and we need to treat it in its individuality, and we just have to see what happens. The thing that I feel at the moment, and by the way, I do agree with you in terms of this, because my mantra whenever I look towards this is that the manager hasn't passed a test yet. I appreciate what he's done within the Europa League, because I think we've achieved some great results. but this is a test. And that, for me, is where he hasn't done well enough. I like to be positive, as you know, so as much as I see that, I don't want to be afraid of it, I'd like to see it as an opportunity for him to correct that. The thing that probably does give me some hope around this, though, Martin, is I think if I asked 5 Rangers fans at the moment, what's your starting lineup? I would get 5 different answers. And the reason why that gives me some positivity, and you mentioned it there because I think it's a great point, is that we have played in some of these games and you can't pull anything off the bench if the game is still in the balance. Even if we were to concede or whatever, I think, we will still go out with the application that we can do it. But if we need something to happen and be able to try and bring someone off, we've got more options now, which helps. So last night, for obvious reasons in terms of European selection, we didn't have Danilo, didn't have Hadji. Again, players who have absolutely come into it just now as well. And we've taken 40 minutes to be able to talk about the whole team. And we haven't mentioned those two because we want to understand what the system will look like on Sunday. But being able to say whoever your starting lineup is going to be, but depending on how the game plays out, all of those factors that we've spoken about, you still have options that you can bring on that very possibly could be game defining.
Yeah, we do have more options than we certainly considered a few weeks ago. That's for sure. But go back to my point, as solidly Presbyterian as it may have been, you need to be in a situation where you can deploy those options and not chasing a 2-0 deficit, which we have been in that position at Hampden far too often over the last few years. So it's about winning those battles, facing up to them, all the things we did last night, but against a team that's probably going to be more motivated, certainly in a hell of a lot better form, and who do have that psychological edge over us. There's no point denying that. It exists. And how we overcome that, it's not obvious to me, it's not clear to me, but then I'm not getting paid hundreds of thousands of pounds to try and solve it. But that's incremental steps through a game, Cammy, really, instead of being 1-0 down at half time and then 2-0 down after 50 minutes or whatever. And then you end up chasing it. We get one back and then there's probably a chance that someone misses and it's just the same old tale. So something needs to be different. Something needs to very clearly and tangibly make us all feel fans, but more importantly them, that this isn't going to be like the other trips here. And look, it's not going to save the league season. I think that's fairly clear. But it could be such a huge lift in the longer term. So a big old afternoon.
Absolutely. Well, listen, that will do us for this week. If you're anything like me, pretty soon I will start going down the old firm classics wormhole, watching them all in the famous victories and stuff as well. And I'll be doing that pretty much across the course of the weekend until it's time to leave the house. Most important thing for me to do is to thank everyone. Thank you to Mike Lee and Paul Myers, our producers. Thank you to you all for listening. But most importantly for me, thank you so much for coming on, Martin. A nice, constructive and positive pod. I'm not like Edgar. I don't just wheel you out for the bad times. I look at the good times with you as well, my friend.
It's a pleasure, mate. And everyone have a good weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay safe, everyone. Enjoy your Old Firm weekend. I hope that you'll be hearing from David on Flagship on Monday to talk about a League Cup final victory against Celtic. In the meantime, if you want to be able to check out loads of great Rangers content, some of which comes from our very own Martyn Ramsay and is absolutely phenomenal, please just head on over to patreon.com/Heart and Hand. We'll speak to you again on Monday, but thanks for listening, folks. Have a brilliant weekend, and come on, Rangers, let's do it.